Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we have another Pro-Am doubles disc review. Well, I, as usual, will be serving as your am, and Mac, as usual, here from Finish Line Disc and Tomahawk Dies and whatever other sponsors you have.
Another round in Discura.
There you go. So he has sponsors, which that clearly clarifies that he's professional at that point. You've seen him on here before, though. You know the guy can throw hard. So we're going to get to show you the full range of a disc that has not even come out yet. So we kind of get like a little sneak peek. That's, of course, thanks to our partners over at Land Pharmacy. But Mac, why don't you tell me what we're throwing today?
We're going to be throwing the Discmania DD1. It's an 11.5 -1.2. So kind of a wind fighter, something that you can really trust into any sorts of winds and, you know, just have it not turn over on you at all. Good for big arms, I'm going to imagine, so we'll see a little bit more once we throw it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this is that, of course, people may have gotten the Horizon DD1 out of one of the mystery boxes from Discmania, and generally speaking, the Horizon plastic has been more overstable when you look at the FD3 and the Cloudbreaker, but this one's going to be a little bit shocking to you, I think, because while we don't have a Horizon DD1 on hand, we'll be able to tell you a little bit about it and compare it to this stock S line. We got a couple other discs we're going to compare it to as well. But before we get into throwing, let's throw it over to our partner who helped make this video possible. I'm sure you're surprised a pharmacy sponsored this video, but Land Pharmacy is actually the best disc golf store in southern Alabama. They carry a wide variety of discs from all the top manufacturers, including Innova, Discraft, Discmania, and all the Trilogy brands, as well as MVP and Axiom. They also carry plenty of plastic from lesser-known brands such as Lone Star Disc and Thought Space Athletics. Their pricing is fantastic. And speaking of pricing, they have a very robust used disc section where you can get some lightly used plastic for a fantastic price, and you can also pick up various disc golf equipment that'll help you along the way. So if you're in Mobile County or any of the surrounding areas, or heck, even if you're on the Eastern Shore, definitely pass on by the Land Pharmacy, as they have a wide variety of equipment that I'm sure you'll love. It's definitely worth the trip. You certainly won't regret it. Alright, so for this video, the disc I'm actually going to compare the DD1 to is first off the Grace, and that's because it has very similar flight numbers. This is 11.5 -1.2, or 11.6 -1.2, whereas the DD1, you know, just has a 5 glide instead of a 6 glide, but other than that, the numbers are basically the same. So I have two different versions of Graces. I have a stock one, and then the Orbit one. Orbit one a little bit more stable than the stock one. Then I actually brought out some S Line DD3s. So this is the stock S Line DD3 that came out a little while back. So I figured I'd kind of, you know, show the faster counterpart to the DD1. And then I had the two DD1s as well. So I'm gonna throw all these on the backhand. We have a pretty decent tailwind here, so stuff's gonna fly a little bit more stable than normal. So I'm gonna be able to get over on them a little bit and see what we can get out of them. So I'm gonna start with the Graces, then I'll throw two DD3s and then the two DD1s. Yeah, so the Graces for me, I've always kind of flown similar to Race, so I kind of expect like a pretty straight flight, not like a crazy amount of turn. I got a little bit, but it, you know, has some nice fade, especially when it's not too windy. Now we're gonna throw the Orbit Grace, which should be a little bit more overstable in comparison. That one had a decent bit more finish than the normal one. So now we're going to throw a couple of DD3s. These are a little bit faster, and honestly the rim width on these are a little uncomfortable for my backhand. That's why I don't throw them. So these might be a little bit wonky for me. Yeah, doesn't fly too much different than the Grace for me, a little faster. But that's kind of an arm speed thing more than anything else. Yeah, like I said, we got a pretty good tailwind today, so everything's kind of just stabling out. But now let's get into the DD1s. Why do we always pick discs to review that make me look worse than I am? I don't understand this.
Take it up with Land Pharmacy.
I love Land Pharmacy. It's not their fault. It's this guy's fault. The thing is, I already know what's going to happen because I've thrown these off camera. You guys over on that thing pretty hard. Like, I was trying to pull it over. It doesn't want to do it. Between the tailwind and the stability of the disc, it ain't happening. That fights out like immediately. It doesn't want to have anything to do with my anhyzer. So I don't have the Horizon DD1 on hand, but I can tell you that when I have thrown a couple of them, because I have actually the owner of Saraland Pharmacy, Stinson, he has a couple that I got to throw around. We were playing like a little casual round, and they're way straighter than that. So somehow, even though in almost every other disc that we've seen, like when it comes to the DD3, or excuse me, the FD3, the one that got put out, I think that was the last disc Simon put out before he left Discmania. So they had the Horizon FD3, then you had the Horizon Cloudbreaker. Both of those actually flew much more overstable than their stock counterparts. But in this like DD1 situation, the S Line stock one actually flies more overstable than the Horizon Special Edition that came in the mystery box. So as you can see, I got virtually nothing out of the DD1s as far as turn goes. I got much more movement out of the Grace and out of the DD3, and the DD3 is supposed to be faster, more overstable. So it's kind of interesting. We'll let Mac throw them. I'll get some numbers as well, and we'll continue the review. All right, folks, so after throwing these discs into a pretty decent tailwind, the disc that wound up going the furthest was the stock Grace at about 325 feet. However, funnily enough, the orange DD1 was actually pretty much right next to it, so they actually went an equal distance. But if you remember, I didn't really have to work as hard on this disc. I kind of threw it pretty flat. This one, I really pulled over and got a flex line out of to be able to get that distance, and so it kind of shows you I had to work a little bit harder to get the flight that I got out of this one. After that, the rest of these were all within kind of like 5 feet of each other, probably like in that 310 range or so. Obviously, this Grace is being a little bit more stable than the other one, so it didn't fly quite as far for me. And then just, I think with the DD3s, it's just because, you know, I don't have the arm speed to get them up to the proper speed for them to fly the way they're supposed to with the wider rim. And so that's probably why they're going to fall a little bit short. But then the other DD1 that I didn't get as much into definitely wound up coming up shorter than all the rest. And it was only about maybe like 300, 305. Just showing you that for me and my arm speed, the DD1 definitely has some added stability in comparison to maybe some other discs that has similar flight numbers. You know, for these flight numbers, I would expect it to fly kind of like a Grace, maybe have a little bit of turn, maybe have a little bit of give, but it really doesn't. Like, it basically went dead straight for me and then it dumped. Like, it never really thought about flipping over. Granted, we threw into a tailwind, so maybe in neutral conditions or a headwind that might change a little bit. But honestly, if you're looking for like a dependable, overstable disc, and maybe the DD3 is like a little too wide in your hand or something like that, then the DD1 could certainly be an option for you when these come out in a few days after I post this video. But we're gonna go ahead and let Mac throw them.
All right, so I'm gonna follow the same order as Dustin. I'm gonna start with the Graces first. I'm gonna try, since we're throwing into tailwinds, throwing these flat, and if anything, I'll try and get over on them a little bit. And we might actually show you all some headwind shots here in a minute, turn around. But let's start with the Royal Grace. So I actually don't have a whole lot of experience with really any of these molds. I've thrown the Graces a little bit, and from what I can tell, they're good bombers out of the box for the higher arm speeds. From what I can also tell, the orbit's supposed to be a little more stable, so let's see how that works out.
Yeah, the orbit's actually Mattio's distance driver of choice, if you'll notice on tour. Yeah, exactly. See ya.
Oh, yeah.
See ya.
Yeah, so I actually ripped over on that one a touch more, and it definitely held out for a little bit, but it had a lot of bite at the end, so definitely something that you can rely on those big distance shots. Let's see how these DD3s do. Kind of the same deal, gonna throw one flat and then maybe try and rip over on a little bit. Similar deal to the Grace, maybe had a little bit more speed to it. I could definitely tell that. Let's try and put a little more power and a little more turn into this one. didn't quite have the stability to want to get the full flight out of that, you probably need to put a little higher, but definitely something you can get those huge distance shots out of. Not that I necessarily recommend throwing those on the course. And lastly, what you're here for, the DD1s. Threw that one a little low, but even with the severe nose down, you know, getting really those full flight characteristics with keeping it parallel to the ground like that, it still stayed straight the whole time and bit at the end. So see if we can get this one higher with a little bit of turn. See if we can compare it pretty well to the DD3. A little higher, definitely a very similar amount of turn put on it, and you saw wasn't even close to the flight of the DD3. Had a lot more stability to it. Could honestly put it higher with almost roller angle on it and get a full flight out of it. So let me go get those numbers and we can put some distances to it. All right, so we got those numbers for you. Keep in mind, like we said, pretty substantial tailwind, probably around 10 miles an hour. So all these numbers are gonna be a little inflated, but the shortest one was the DD3, which if you remember is the one that held turn the whole way, didn't get the real full flight out of it. So that was about 430 feet. The DD1, surprisingly, that I threw maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground, actually got all the way out to like 450. So probably some good ground play off of that. But, you know, like we said, it has a surprising amount of glide, which we'll get to that in a second. The Royal Grace and the purple DD3 were about the same distance at around 460, whereas the Halo Royal Grace, the Kristen Tatar one, was around 470. So definitely some good stuff out of that. But surprising enough, the DD1 that did not even get close to a full flight out of it went the farthest at around 480. So I think these actually have a sneaky amount of glide. I don't know that 5 is really all that correct on the glide number. Just from what I've seen, it's hard to tell with the tailwinds, so that's why we're gonna turn around and throw it straight into a headwind this time. But yeah, really surprising stuff. Obviously held up better than the DD3 in the wind, and just got some sneaky distance on it. So let's turn around, do a little bit more experimenting, throw it into a head. So we turned around, throwing into that 10 mile an hour straight headwind now. We took out the lighter weight DD3 and the just regular stock Royal Grace. So we're gonna throw just the Halo Grace, the heavier DD3, and then both the DD1s. So the DD3 and the Grace, I'm gonna throw just flat, like a normal distance shot I would. So let's kind of get those as a baseline. And you can see they're acting very different because of this headwind now. Like I said, pretty substantial.
Yeah, a lot of turn there. Nothing really came out on that one.
Let's try the DD3. I imagine this is going to turn over even more than that one did.
Okay. Dude, that thing didn't move off the line.
Yeah, it actually went pretty straight. I did give that one more hyzer. Maybe that was just subconscious. But pretty good. Definitely a very finessey disc for a win like this.
Definitely tell it wanted to turn.
Yeah, so let's try and throw this DD1 flat, and then I'll decide what kind of shot I want to throw based off how it flies. That was just stock, like touch of hyzer. Flipped it up to flat, just rode for a while, so.
All right, so the numbers are in and it's time to give our verdict here for the S Line DD1. First of all, for a disc that has similar flight numbers to the Grace and kind of come out of a similar factory system, when you consider the partnership between Latitude and Discmania, this is definitely not a Grace. It's not even close. This thing is very beefy for me when it comes to like an amateur arm speed. It's not so overstable that it's not useful because it is very controllable and it has that smaller rim. So for me as an AM, This is almost like a kind of dependable headwind fighter in a way. I mean, you saw even when he threw into a headwind, it didn't really turn, it just kind of flew dead straight, and then it still came out. So for me, this is something that I could throw into a headwind and trust, or if I needed something like overstable, this honestly kind of flies similar to some of my Zars I have in my bag, you know, which are kind of like overstable race basically. So this disc definitely surprised me in its stability, not just on face value on its flight numbers, but also just because I'm so used to the Halo or Orbit or whatever plastic you want to call it being more overstable than the stock counterpart. I mean, it's that way for the Cloudbreaker and the FD3 within the Discmania system, and it's that way for really almost every disc in every other manufacturer's system as well. But for whatever reason, this first run of stock S Line DD1s are more overstable than the Horizon version that came in the mystery box. We even threw it on some forehands and it handled that torque too. So I mean, this disc is a dependable, you know, straight to slightly overstable, you know, 11 speed that definitely could get value from anyone. Obviously for someone like him, it's probably more for like control shots in the woods, it's maybe some hyzer flips, maybe, you know, just some dead straight shots with some finish at the end. For me, a little bit more of an overstable distance driver slot that still feels comfortable in the hand because it doesn't have that super wide rim like the DD3 has. So yeah, definitely a good disc, just more overstable than I anticipated.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what Dustin said, I don't know if this is what it was intended to be when they made it, but I really hope it stays this way. I think this is a pretty unique disc slot in that it's a controllable, kind of lower speed distance driver being an 11 speed, but it has a lot of bite to it. It can fight the wind, which I think is really hard to find. And actually it's a slot that I've personally been looking for a while. So I got my bag right there. I think this is about to just go straight into it. But I can tell you personally, I felt like just throwing this 4 or 5 times, I feel like I have a really good idea of the stability, and it would probably be my go-to disc to control into winds like this. For me, he said it would be more of a control disc in the woods, which it definitely can be. I actually think I would use this more for those pushing sort of windy open shots. So if I need like 400 to 450 feet, I know this isn't going to flip on me even if there's like some sort of sneaky headwind out there. So I think that's what this is going to be useful for. And like you said, it's very dependable on all sorts of off-axis torque. It's going to auto-correct for you in a certain sense. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think for AMs it has some uses, not as much as the bigger arms, which that's pretty much true for most of the discs that we review. But there are uses for AMs. I think there's a lot of uses for the bigger arms though. Very unique slot. I would definitely recommend trying it if that's a shot that you've been looking for in your bag.
I don't know if this was intentional, like he said, if they meant for this to be as overstable as it is. If it is, awesome. Now we know that's going to be a dependable one. I'd be curious to see if that will maybe prompt Discmania to come out with like another 11 speed that's maybe a little bit less overstable for, you know, AMs, a little bit more AM friendly in that regard. But yeah, good disc.
I'll say that if this is not what it was intended to be, this is going to be one of those runs that I foresee people really looking for. You know, those original stock runs, there's like, these are the money runs. I could definitely see this being one of them. So, raving reviews from me.
But yeah, that's going to do this review. Hope you'll follow and subscribe. Hope you'll follow over at Mac as well. You also get some lessons locally if you're in the area or willing to travel. And I'll put those links down below. But yeah, catch you next time.
See ya.